Okay, so here we are back again talking about meditation, mindfulness of breathing, which we already went over. And so again, I just want to review the mechanics of this because it'll apply to our next meditation that we're going to do. And that is, we have the faculty of mindfulness, then we have the object of mindfulness, and then the other element that we're working with here is introspection. And so what introspection means in the context of meditation is that your mindfulness is attending to the object, and then your introspection is like the guard watching the quality of your mindfulness. And so it's introspection that notices when your mindfulness falls to either excitation, running off with a thought, or dullness into sleep. And so as soon as introspection sees that mindfulness has wavered, you signal that, and then you bring mindfulness back to the object. So that's what we're working with here. We need both of those elements to maintain the continuity of the meditation. So explore this in your practice. And so for this next meditation, this meditation is called taking the mind as the path, or settling the mind in its natural state, or taking the space of the mind as the path. So the object of meditation in this practice, rather than the breath or the body, is the space of the mind and everything that's arising within the mind. Okay, so we have all these different domains of consciousness, the domain of the physical senses, we have the domain of sight, we have the domain of all of our senses. And then we also have this mental domain, okay? And so when we're practicing shamatha, our attention is exclusive to one domain where the object is existing. So in the mindfulness of breathing, we're focusing on the tactile sensations. And so in this practice, we're going into the mental domain. And this is where thoughts arise, imageries, memories, all of this. And the practice here is, they describe it from the Tibetan tradition, it's like a shepherd sitting out on a vast plain and watching his herd just doing grazing. And so he's sitting steady there, watching his animals in the distance. And so in much the same way, we're sitting steady in the seat of our awareness, in the seat of our mindfulness, and we are just observing as the animals of our thoughts come and go. Another way to think of this is like your mind becomes like the sky, and the thoughts are like the clouds coming through, and you just allow them to come and allow them to go. And the pith instruction here is, without distraction and without grasping, rest awareness right where it is. Settle the mind without distraction and without grasping. And so grasping at a thought and getting carried away with it, or on the other hand, the distraction of just falling into stupor or something like that. So again, we're always trying to balance between this falling into laxity and dullness, or going into excitation. And so in this practice, our eyes are going to be slightly open, and initially we go through the settling of the body, speech, and mind. And then we come to simply observe the thoughts as they're passing, and not getting caught, not identifying with the movements of the mind, not getting caught up in the story. So this isn't like a contemplation of all the thoughts that are coming through your mind. You're not engaging with the thoughts. You're just not impeding them. You're not holding them back, but you're also not encouraging them. And so one way of thinking of this is like, you are not thinking, but thoughts will arise. So it's a subtle distinction there, but as you go into the practice, you'll begin to have that experience where you'll just be sitting there in the practice, and all of a sudden a thought will arise, and you didn't think it, and yet there it is. And so that's kind of the idea of this meditation, is that we are releasing from the incessant thinking, and we are just releasing into awareness while being aware of everything that is arising in the mind. Similarly, if nothing is arising in the mind, then we just allow for that, and we just allow for that open spaciousness and maintain our awareness in the space of the mind. Okay? And so this is a bit more of a subtle practice than the mindfulness of breathing, because the object of the meditation is more varied and moving and can entice us, because each thought that arises, if we follow the referent of the thought, if we go on the storyline of the thought, then we get carried away. And so we have to be very careful to just allow the thought to arise, see it, and just let it pass. And so another way to think of this is that we are cultivating stillness in the midst of movement. The movement being the movements of the mind, the movements of thinking, the movements of the subtle energy in the mind and body, and then the stillness of awareness. And so the first thing that we have to do in this meditation is to identify stillness and identify movement and actually see the difference between the two, because a lot of times the stillness of our awareness is just fused with the movement of our thinking and we just get carried to and fro. So this meditation, we're making this distinction between stillness and movement, and then resting in stillness in the midst of movement. So this can be a very deep practice as we go further and further into it, and it can be a real break for the mind. And there is a wisdom aspect to this as well, because one of the things that we're doing in this practice is that we are fundamentally understanding that these thoughts that are arising, everything that's arising in my mind, all of these mental processes are not me. It's not who I am. And I don't have to identify with it, and I don't have to chase after it. And if you look into these thoughts, if you begin to observe these mental phenomena arising, you may also come to see that they're sort of dreamlike. Are they really even there? You can look into what is their true nature. These thoughts and this mind that has given me so much trouble. Now as you're resting in awareness, it's just kind of like clouds in the sky. And so that insight alone can be very healing and liberative. And the other aspect of this is that there is a natural healing that takes place when we allow ourselves to just drop into the stillness of awareness and get off of the train of thought. And when the mind does this, there's a natural healing that takes place. So it's really a practice that is worth cultivating. And another reason to practice it is that we can practice it at any time in our life. It's a little difficult to practice mindfulness of breathing while you are in the midst of action. But with this stillness in the midst of motion, we can always be cultivating this eye of the storm mentality, this stillness in the midst of whatever motion we're engaged with. So the body could be very active, you could be talking, you could be listening, and yet the awareness is very steady in the midst of the motion. So this is a wonderful practice, and we'll now go into a guided meditation on it.